Gurudev, Gurudev, Jai Gurudev. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahams Prevakacharya Stotara Satashi Srimad. His Divine Grace Abhay Charanavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahams Prevakacharya Stotara Satashi Srimad. His Divine Grace Abhay Charanavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namtaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Jai. So today we're continuing with Jad Bharat, speaking to Maharaj Rahugana. And Jad Bharat is using a teaching or preaching technique, if you will, to which is an allegory to assist Maharaj Rahugana to understand the material world. So this is Canto 5, Chapter 13, text number 5. Rahugana converses with Jad Bharat. Text 5. Adrishyajali Swavakarna Sukla Uluka Vabhir Vityati Tarantaratma Apunya Vrikshan Shayate Kusardito Marishi Toyanam Abib, Toya in Abihid Haivati Kavchit. The word for word, Adrishya, invincible. Jili, of crickets or kind of bees. Swavana, by the sound. Karna Sula, whose airs are disturbed. Uluka, of the owls. Vagbihi, by sound vibrations. Vyatita, very disturbed. Anta Atma, whose mind and heart. Apunya Vrikshan, impious trees that have no fruits or flowers. Shrayate, he takes shelter of. Shudha, from hunger. Arditaha, suffering. Marishi Toyani, the waters of a mirage in the desert. Adhidhavati, he runs after, Kavachit sometimes. Srila Prabhupada's translation and purport. Wandering in the forest of the material world, the conditioned soul sometimes hears an invisible cricket making harsh sounds, and his ears become very much aggrieved. Sometimes his heart is pained by the sounds of owls, which are like the harsh words of his enemies. Sometimes he takes shelter of a tree that has no fruits or flowers. He approaches such a tree due to his strong appetite, and thus he suffers. He would like to acquire water, but he is simply illusioned by a mirage, and he runs after it. Srila Prabhupada's purport. In Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said that Bhagavat philosophy is meant for people who are completely free from envy. Paramo Nimat Saranam. The material world is full of envious people. Even within one's inner circle, there is much backbiting. And this is compared to the sound vibration of cricket in the forest. One cannot see the cricket, but one hears its sound and thus becomes aggrieved. When one takes to Krishna consciousness, one always hears unpalatable words from relatives. This is the nature of the world. One cannot avoid mental distress due to the backbiting of envious people. Being very much aggrieved, sometimes one goes to a sinful person for help, but he has no means to help because he has no intelligence. Thus, the living entity is disappointed. This is like running after a mirage in the desert in an effort to find water. Such activities do not produce any tangible results. Due to being directed by the illusory energy, a conditioned soul suffers in so many ways. The translation again, wandering in the forest of material world, the conditioned soul sometimes hears an invisible cricket making harsh sounds, and his ears become very much aggrieved. Sometimes his heart is pained by the sounds of owls, which are like the harsh words of his enemies. Sometimes he takes shelter of a tree that has no fruits or flowers. He approaches such a tree due to his strong appetite, and thus he suffers. He would like to acquire water, but is simply illusion by a mirage, and he runs after it. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyana Gana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastabhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Pastyathyadesha Tarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastabhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamine Namaste Krishna Padaya Prabhupada Shitatmane Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Bhaktivedanta Tinamine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Kadadhar Shivasari Shri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Hare Krishna, dear friends, dear devotees, thank you very much for being here this morning. I'm very grateful that I can be here. Thankful on this wonderful Tuesday morning. So Rahugana converses with Jadbart, and we know that the technique that he's using is using allegory to help Maharaj Rahugana to understand the material world in this verse. And so this translation, wandering in the forest of the material world, this is okay. The point that Srila Prabhupada is helping us to understand is how the material living entities are affected by this wandering in the material world. Sometimes when we hear these texts, the tendency is sometimes to immediately think of the devotees, because we're a community and we live in a community. And so naturally, the tendency, these are the people we have contact with. So we think about the devotees, and we don't often, many cases, some people may not understand that these texts are actually specifically explaining what is happening for the materialists, for those persons that are engaged fully in material life, and not specifically directed to devotees. Although we understand from Srila Prabhupada, because when we take to bhakti, when we take to this path of bhakti, the fan keeps going for many. And so there is a tendency to have some of these different wanderings, if you will, in the minds of devotees, as as we are all in the process of purification. So unless Prabhupada has explained, unless a person is a pure devotee of the Lord, pure devotee, Rupa Goswami explained to us what it means to be a pure devotee of the Lord. absolute absorption in activities that are only favorable for the Lord. Nothing that is based on our desire for ourselves. And so these texts, they are specifically meant for people that have no knowledge about spiritual paradigm. They have no knowledge of the path of bhakti. They have not yet been graced by the mercy of a devotee to go into the understanding the path of bhakti. So this allegorical way of speaking to Maharaj Rahugana, although meant for the materialist, as I said, sometimes we can use some of this teaching within our bhakti community also, because we're in the process of purification. And so, however, it's important to remember that as aspiring devotees, that we are given the protection of the mercy of the acharyas, and we are given the mercy specifically of Srila Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada's representatives in order to understand some of this teaching, some of the teachings of Jad Bharat. However, because I am not pure, when we learn about pure devotees, then I can make this applicable to my own life, my own development in Krishna consciousness, my own purification in Krishna consciousness. And that is very valuable, because if I can do that, then I can understand what are some of my obstacles and what are some of my blocks. And I can then understand how I might still have some of those tendencies from my past conditioning of being fully absorbed in material life. So this is the mood of how Jad Bharat is sharing these verses to really help everyone, specifically though, for the materialist. So here in this purport, we're hearing about the wandering in the material world. Conditioned soul sometimes hears an invisible cricket making harsh sounds. So if anybody has ever lived in any third world country, or I don't know, sometimes that's not, that saying a third world country is not politically correct. However, if anybody's lived in a country outside of the US, where the natural elements and nature, one can still hear these different entities in the natural nature, then maybe some of you might have heard crickets. I specifically, have lived in different countries in the world, and I know many times I wasn't able to sleep because of crickets. And so Prabhupada says here that this cricket, and in this verse, it says, by the sounds of the crickets, although it appears to be invisible, the ears become disturbed, karna sula, whose ears are disturbed. And then a person can become very disturbed by the sounds of crickets, because the sound is not, it's a sound that's continuous. Crickets continually make the sound that, and when there are many, then yes, it can really affect a person's sleep or a person's consciousness. Prabhupada says here that it's making harsh sounds and his ears become very much aggrieved. A person's ears become very much aggrieved. So when a person is aggrieved, then that person is thinking that someone is doing something to them that's just not acceptable. They become disturbed. This word aggrieved that Prabhupada uses in this text is it's kind of a mood of, it creates disturbance within a person. And so sometimes the heart is pained by the sounds of owls. If anyone hears owl, they also make a very screeching sound. And yeah, if a person is hearing the sounds of owls, they can become also very disturbed. So now these are being used in order to help us to understand, the people within the material world and what happens when we hear the kind of things that come from people in the material world. So here it's Prabhupada refers to harsh words. It's just like harsh words. These harsh words, this sound vibration, Vagbihi, by sound vibration, these harsh words are very disturbing. It's disturbing to the mind and it's disturbing to the heart. So the owls and the crickets are being used to help us explore what it means to be disturbed. So if we went and let's say lived in a place, for a day where we just hear crickets and owls, we'll get an understanding of what happens in the mind and hearts of people that are disturbed in the material world. And then then here again, he says, they sometimes take shelter of a tree that has no fruit or flowers. So that's a barren tree, right? When we think of a tree that has no fruit, no flowers, in general, that's a tree. Prabhupada explains here in this purport that type of shelter, to take shelter of a tree that's barren and has no fruit, that type of shelter is not a shelter that will give us any nourishment. If we're looking to be nourished, then that's not where we would go, to a tree that has no fruit. And so he says that a person might approach this kind of tree. This is Jadbart again. Jadbart continuing. A person might approach this kind of tree due to his strong appetite, and thus he suffers. So a person that's approaching a tree that has no fruit, that's barren, that cannot give any nourishment, then that person will suffer because they won't get the nourishment that they need from that fruit. And then the last point that Jabart made here is that he would like to acquire water, but it's simply illusion by a mirage, and he runs after it. I don't know if any of you have ever lived in a desert. But however, sometimes when you are in a desert, I remember being in a desert in some place in Africa, you do see something, you do think that there's water in the horizon of the desert. However, as you go closer to that place where you think there's water, there's no water. It's all illusion. It's all very illusionary. And Prabhupada says here, he uses, I'm sorry, in the translation, Sanskrit translation, I like that here that His Holiness Hirdana Maharaj, he helps us to kind of go back to the Sanskrit to look at that. And I really appreciate how he does that, because it's kind of brought my awareness to being more attentive to what's actually being spoken from the Sanskrit translation. So here, Marishi Toyani, the water of a mirage in the desert. And then the other translation, Abhid Havati. He runs after it, sometimes running after it. So yeah, people in the material world are sometimes running after this mirage, after this water that they think that they're going to get, and they won't. It's not real. It's all an illusion. And so then Prabhupada then goes into the purport, and he starts this purport by saying that Bhagavatam philosophy is meant for people who are completely free from envy. So this is quite interesting, because in the translation we're hearing about what's happening in our illusory understanding of the material world, or for materialist illusory understanding of the material world. Because again, the point that we have been given the umbrella of taking shelter of bhakti. So at least we have some awareness, some knowledge. Materialists, they have no knowledge at all. So this point Prabhupada is making here is he's goes straight to talking about envy. That this envy, he says, the material world is full of envy. And then he speaks about that Bhagavatam is meant for people who are free from envy. This Bhagavatam, it's the Srimad Bhagavatam. So then I would think, well, if it's meant for people who are free from envy, and I am in the process of purification, I am not pure, or we know the qualities of a pure devotee, then that would mean that I'm not really qualified, for speaking Srimad Bhagavatam, because I'm not completely free from envy. This point is really poignant because we are so very fortunate that we have been given this opportunity by Srila Prabhupada's representatives, to be able to hear Srimad Bhagavatam in this lifetime. So that's a huge blessing for anyone that has been given this science of bhakti. It's not ordinary, because Prabhupada says this Bhagavatam it's not meant for ordinary people. It's meant for people that are pure, that are free from envy, free from pride, free from ego. But yet we have this opportunity, and I have this opportunity, we all have this opportunity, by the mercy of the spiritual master. And so that verse, that is so very key, it's kind of like a foundation for anyone that's practicing bhakti. Tadviri paripatena paripashena sevaya upadeshanti te jnana jnanastadvadarshinaha. That's so key, that verse of being submissive, hearing from the spiritual master, following the spiritual master's instruction in a humble and submissive way. That's ultimately kind of like a walking stick for each person that gets an opportunity to enter into practicing bhakti. It's kind of like a stronghold, if we will, to help us to remember how we're even getting this mercy. It's only the mercy of the spiritual master that this is possible. Because then Prabhupada continues about this material world. He says it's full of envious people. The material world is full of envious people. That's a bold, Srila Prabhupada always makes really bold statements. However, and when we hear the translation about the wanderings in the material world, then we can understand, like, yeah, people are wandering in the material world due to envy. Now, this envy that Srila Prabhupada speaks about within, and he goes into details talking about this envy, is important in that it's not something that we can automatically just stop, although we would want to not be envious. Again, it's grace, mercy that will possibly help us to minimize envy, because it's so predominant in the world. And because there's such a deep-rooted anartha within our hearts, it actually comes mainly, and Krishna explains this in Bhagavad Gita, because we wanted to be controllers. We want to be proprietors. And most importantly, we came in this material world because we're envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We somehow wanted to have some of that position, or somehow we had some desire to be a controller in a place where we couldn't be. And so here we are in this material world. Again, I want to reiterate the point that because of the mercy of the spiritual master, we have the knowledge. And so even though we might be in the material world, because of the knowledge, we're not always in the material world, because we do have this knowledge, and the knowledge is not different from Krishna. So generally, when we think of envy, Prabhupada says here we're full of envious people. Material world is full of envious people. So when we think of envy in the material world, well, we don't have to go too very far to understand envy in the material world, because it's all around us. I mean, as Kali Yuga advances, we can see envy everywhere, right? We don't have to go. We don't have to do anything really to see envious people. We just need to open our computers and listen to the politics of the world, and we'll hear about envious people. And we just have to look at the wars that are being fought in the world, and we'll know that they're envious people. So yeah, there's so many ways that we can understand how this envy is there with everyone. However, as devotees, as those that are aspiring to be devotees, as those that have been given this mercy from the spiritual master to practice sadhana bhakti, to eventually become more desirous to go deeper in the practice of bhakti, then this envy needs to be at least understood clearly, so we can be aware how we might still hold on to some of those envious tendencies, even though we're getting the mercy to become free from them. And so Prabhupada says here, he goes on, he says, even within one's inner circle, there is backbiting, and this is compared to the sound vibration of the crickets. So here again, he's using this explanation of Jagbart to help us to understand how this envy can manifest. What are some symptoms of this envy? And one of the symptoms of this envy is backbiting. So when we think of backbiting, yeah, we think of people that are duplicitous. They're not straightforward. They say things perhaps to us as we're speaking to them personally, and then when they leave us, they may say something else. And we see that going on in the material world everywhere around us. And sometimes that does seep into the devotee community, even though devotees' hearts are generally soft and they don't want to be like that. Somehow, because material energy is so strong, there's a verse that I try to keep on my desk every day to remind me about this, how strong this material energy is and how difficult it is to cross it. This is from the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Everyone knows this verse, Devi hi esha gunamayi, mama maya duratmaya, this Prabhupada says this, Krishna says to Arjuna, this divine energy of mind, consisting of the 3 modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who are surrendered unto me can easily cross over it. So as we are getting purified and on the path of bhakti by the practice of devotional service, then we're becoming more surrendered to the Lord. Then we are able to cross over some of these things that Jadbart is sharing, is teaching Maharaj Rahugana. So Prabhupada says this backbiting It's compared to the noise of crickets. And we already talked a little bit about the noise that crickets make. And so in devotional communities, this backbiting goes on. And, it's unfortunate. At the same time, it's a part of becoming free. It's a part of the purification that's needed for an individual when they may engage in that kind of behavior. Then Prabhupada says that when a person takes to Krishna consciousness, a person always hears unpalatable words from relatives. Even Jad Bharati heard unpalatable words. And this is why he took the position that he did as someone that appeared to be just in our modern day language, maybe just like a crazy person, a mental person, or something like that. However, relatives can very much disturb the minds of those that are trying to endeavor to go to practice bhakti, and they can make a person very much aggrieved. I think we've all, many of us maybe, have had that experience. I know I've had that experience in my early years of Krishna consciousness. My parents definitely did not appreciate that I was leaving, and of course then going to a foreign country away from everyone. They didn't understand that, because that was my first service in Krishna consciousness, was to go to Africa. So there's so many reasons why parents might not appreciate when their children get involved in Krishna consciousness. Of course, this is not for this choir, because this choir here now, all of you, many of you have been practicing devotional life for so long, and many of you have children that are practicing devotional life, and those children might not have that experience of a parent being unfavorable. But even in devotee life, sometimes we'll see a parent may want a child to explore the practice of bhakti only to a certain point, as long as it doesn't interfere with maybe some of the things that they're still aspiring for materially. Sometimes we'll see that in our devotee community. Then Prabhupada again makes this point: this is the nature of the world. This is the nature of the world. This is our uncomfortable situation. When Parikshit Maharaj in the first canto was receiving the age of Kali, that was the beginning of helping us to understand this age, this time that we're in. We cannot avoid the mental distresses that we're going to experience in this age of Kali. So the distress, again, Prabhupada points out, is due to the backbiting. So he uses this word twice, backbiting. Backbiting. It's quite graphic. Backbiting of envious people. Envious people. People who are thinking more about themselves than they are of others. And again, this word, aggrieved, being very much aggrieved, being very much thinking that something is being done wrongly. Something is not going the way that I would want it to go. So that person then becomes very sad, very distressed. They go to other sources. So the materialists, they're always they don't have a way to go to bhakti unless they meet a devotee. So of course they will always go to people that have no intelligence to get help. However, sometimes even devotees, they may have some distress due to perhaps some material desires, and they may want to get some help, and sometimes they may go, to people outside of the devotee community to get help. We see this a lot in our work, where devotees are mentally distressed and they go to, psychologists, sociologists, whatever, psychiatrists in the world, that maybe they have no understanding of bhakti. And oftentimes this can be disastrous. Sometimes we've seen that. We're not in any way advocating not to not do that. We're simply sharing what this purport is sharing from Srila Prabhupada. That sometimes we go to people with no intelligence, meaning they have no understanding of bhakti. And so this is why it's so important that devotees become available to help people in these different areas of what's needed in our society. I think Parameshwar gave class yesterday, such a beautiful class. And so she's studying to be a counselor, which is so very important because that's needed. She will be a person with intelligence. What is real intelligence? Someone that can give a person an understanding of the process of bhakti. So she will, in her own way, just like here we see Jad Bharat is using allegory, to help Maharaj Rahugana. In her way, she will find a way, I'm sure, to be able to help those persons that come to her care, because she has this foundation of understanding the science of bhakti. So she is intelligent. Otherwise, it's only disappointment when we have people that have no understanding of God, have no understanding of Krishna. They will lead us in ways that they think is right, which for a devotee can be disastrous. And again, the point about running as a mirage, practice this like the desert, running after a mirage in the desert. So we hear this Prabhupada again. Of course, he refers to this because he's referring to the translation. And he's saying it doesn't produce any tangible results. And so this causes suffering, this causes misery in the material world. Now, how does, in terms of devotees, do we just say, oh, this is just the materialist, this is what they're going through? And Jad Bharat is, this whole chapter and the next chapter, 14, it's totally it doesn't have anything to do with me. That's not absolutely true. Not absolutely true. Unless, of course, there are those of you that are pure, then it doesn't apply. That are aware that, you're pure. Because everyone is pure, right? Everyone is a pure part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. However, we may not fully be aware of that purity that we are, or we may not be able to practice that in our life, that purity, that spiritual part of us that we are, that spiritual being that we really are. We may still have some of this that Jad Bharat is talking about, this illusory mirage. And so in Bhagavatam, in this Srimad Bhagavatam, in the same chapter, I believe, the same canto, Prabhupada gives the meaning to the word envious. He explains that almost everyone, and we hear him speak about that he explains that this is not, he uses this word, it's an ugly quality. It's an ugly quality to be envious. And in another way, he reminds us very humorously that it also includes us. So Prabhupada, it's not that he didn't say it doesn't include us. He reminds us it does include us, although we don't have to keep ourselves in delusion, right? We can come out of this illusion, and we are given every opportunity to come out of this illusion by the mercy of all their acharyas. Yeah. So Of course, there are different ways that is explained for us to interact with each other, as far as associating with each other and as far as getting help with this tendency to be envious. So Prabhupada gives us that he gives us this how do you say, this instruction that every person, when he meets a person that's more qualified than themselves, then they should be very happy. So somebody that's more qualified, what does that really mean for us? A more qualified person. Well, firstly, we look at their behavior, we look at their example, and we see, like Srila Prabhupada, his example. For example, in the early days when the devotees were coming to Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada was initiating a lot. He initiated many, many devotees. And I heard this story from one of my spiritual master's godbrother. Can't remember which one. And then devotees was telling Srila Prabhupada, the devotees are leaving. They're leaving. They're going back into sinful life. They're going back into material life. And because they really wanted Prabhupada to stop initiating so much. And Srila Prabhupada said to the devotees that were bringing this, they were alarmed because apparently many devotees were leaving. And Prabhupada said, well, at least they're leaving. Yes, he was aware. Yes, they're leaving. But at least they're not going back to eating meat. And Prabhupada was very gracious in how he valued those persons that came to him. So he didn't, he said, well, yeah, they're not eating meat. So he saw the good quality, whatever good quality may have been there in those persons. He exemplified to his disciples what to look for those good qualities. Another time, a sannyasi had left the movement, had left Prabhupada. And then a package had arrived for Srila Prabhupada. And this servant brought the package to Prabhupada. It was a big package. Prabhupada was kind of, whoa, what's this? Open it. So the devotee opened the package. And it was the sannyasi's danda. The sannyasi had sent it back to Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada said, just see, he's so thoughtful. He sent it back. He sent back the danda. He didn't say, oh, he just fell down. He's such nonsense. No. So this is the graciousness. This is the purity. So we look for examples like this. We look for those kinds of examples that will see the good quality even in someone that maybe, so many things may appear to be unhealthy, toxic. Look for the good qualities. This is Srila Prabhupada's example. So when we see someone like that, we're pleased, which is why everyone is happy when they talk about Srila Prabhupada. Which is why everyone, when they read stories about Prabhupada, their hearts become light. Because he was someone that was free from envy. And then Prabhupada explains to us, he says, when you meet someone less qualified, then we need to be compassionate to them. So we're just with Anandini and Yashadev Prabhus, and just so inspired by seeing how amazing how they give their lives in the service. It's just beautiful. It's beautiful for me, and I'm sure for many of you, to watch this young couple who's, raising a family must be difficult. And at the same time, they're making themselves available to be compassionate to others. So this is also one of the ways that we can become free from envy. And then, of course, when we meet somebody that's equal to us, we become friends with them. So Prabhupada has given us the blueprint of how we can practice not being envious. in our devotee communities. And Ajahn Bharat has given us the blueprint of understanding what material life is like for the conditioned souls. And we're aware, because many of us, myself, have come through that wandering. So it's not something we're not aware of. And so this freedom from envy is a qualification for bhakti. And I just kind of wanted to do this for 1 minute to check, with us. My spiritual master writes about love in action. And when I read this verse, I thought, envy in action. Envy in action. How do we face this envy in action that might still be there in our communities as we're going through the purification process, to remember that we're actually pure servants of the Lord? And so there's a little survey that I'd like us to just listen to. I try to take the survey myself, and perhaps we can just reflect on this and hear how the mirage of the desert, or the sound of the crickets and the owls may still be there for some of us, possibly. I know for me, they're still there. So do we talk about devotees' service in a negative way? These are just introspection. Do we raise doubts about devotees who are successful in some ways? Do we downplay the positive contributions of others? If there's a project that we're involved in and something goes wrong with it, do we blame another devotee for the problem, overlooking our own part in it? When we try to get to know a devotee, do we have a lot of spontaneous interest in learning about their flaws or weaknesses? I know devotees like that. As soon as they get to meet someone, they want to hear, what is the dirt on that person? Do we openly criticize or reprimand devotees? Do we feel happy to just set them straight? I remember in my earlier days, definitely, I would do that a lot, try to set devotees straight. As you get older, we realize I can only set myself straight. Do we stop from supporting devotees who is not doing the service that you don't want, that we don't see the value or importance of? Oftentimes devotees do things and we may criticize them just because we don't see the value in it. It might have value for them. Do we feel a sense of happiness when a rival devotee faces trouble or is reprimanded by a senior devotee or guru? And there's so much of this that can be related to gurus, right? So much of checking our own envy, because believe it or not, disciples actually envy their gurus sometimes. And this comes from our initial envy of Krishna. So this is just a few thoughts that I was having this morning about envy, and checking in with myself. Do I get pleasure when I hear a devotee being criticized? So Ajahn Bharat, he's spending this time with Maharaj Rahugana, enlivening him, nourishing his soul. And in the same way, Srila Prabhupada, he has come to this planet to nourish our souls. And he gave him that benediction to others to help to carry that on. And we are also to take that mission, take that mantle, if you will, and just try to share it as much as we can. Okay, my dear friends, I see it's late. Sorry. Just a few thoughts. And if you have some comments, some reflections, I appreciate that. Okay. I'm not sure anybody's here.
Hare Krishna Mataji, I'm here. Thank you for a wonderful,
Okay.
wonderful class. Thank you for giving me clarity on a lot of this part of the Shastra and really making it, clear that it's looking at people in the material world. And I really liked your point. I don't know, Ezra. Give me a minute. It's my little one talking to me. I'm caring for
Grandma.
them this morning. But yeah, but just thank you so much for telling us that it's also we may have some of these tendencies and we need to look at them. And I wonder if you could just speak a little bit about when we find them, like if you're answering that survey even and you're finding, maybe I do that a little bit, or maybe I do it a lot. Um, what do we do in bhakti then to address that in ourselves? What do we do when we see, I've been at Geeta Nagari and had a cricket in the cabin, and like 1,000 crickets outside are wonderful. One cricket inside, it's like you'll do anything, to find the cricket and like brush it out the door because you just can't rest. So like a
Yeah,
dripping
can't sleep.
faucet. So if you could just maybe speak a little bit to that, even in your own experience, like you said in your early days when you had that tendency, what did you do?
Well, okay, thank you for that question. That's so beautiful because yeah, that definitely one of the things is to be able to associate with devotees in ways that Srila Prabhupada shared, being pleased when we see devotees that are more advanced than us, with our equals, how we're like friends, and then we're compassionate to those, yeah, that we're trying to share Krishna consciousness with, that will help us for sure. And then Rupa Goswami gives us the 6 loving exchanges between the devotees, how to practice those loving exchanges with each other on a daily basis. And of course, Krishna tells Arjuna mainly it's lust. So, envy comes from lust. So how do we understand this lust? For that, which reflects in our material desires. We may still have some material desires, but most importantly, at least in my life that I've learned, is to really pray for the grace and the mercy of the spiritual master. That's what I've found, that and Prabhupada refers to that. He refers to the power of prayer in so many situations. I mean, there are like 50 or more prayers in the Srimad Bhagavatam from different personalities that just pray to Krishna, just really just humble themselves and pray to Krishna. Envy is not something we can just get rid of ourselves. It's just not possible. It's only by the grace and the mercy of the Lord. And so if we humble ourselves to the spiritual master, to the Lord, to the devotees, then there will be reciprocation. And then within our own hearts, because the Lord is in the heart, we will that tendency for envy will be transformed. It will be transformed. We will see the goodness in other people. We will see the good qualities in others, as opposed to the rivalry of envy. Because the opposite of envy is love. The opposite of envy is care, care for others, loving others, being compassionate with others, understanding Srila Prabhupada's purpose, his mission. How do we try our best? Prabhupada says, there's a quote that I wrote from Srila Prabhupada. He says, we should utilize our talents without being envious of others. You should do your best, but you should not be envious of others. In material life, there's plenty of envy of others' progress. But in spiritual life, one encourages another. Oh, you're doing very nice. That is Radharani. She says, oh, there is a very nice devotee. Please, Krishna, accept that person. This is one of the things that Srila Prabhupada has shared with us, has given to us. And so one of the ways is to appreciate the devotees. If we appreciate, my Guru Maharaj taught his disciples that in so many ways. Quick story, really quick story. There was once a devotee that one of my Guru Maharaj's godbrother, that was very disturbed with my spiritual master. And he called him a demon. He would call him a demon publicly in different places. And so when my Guru Maharaj was leaving his body, I asked him, I said, how do we as disciples relate to this person? Because frankly speaking, many of the disciples was disturbed, you know? And I was curious, like my Guru Maharaj is leaving and we are here and we got to deal with this person. And what do we do? So I asked him, how do we deal with this person? And he explained to me, he said, there are different ways to serve Srila Prabhupada. Just like in the Bhagavatam, there are different ways to present Krishna consciousness. Here we see it's being presented as an allegory, Jadbar. But there are different ways. Narada Muni presents Krishna consciousness like a riddle. And we see in the fourth canto we were reading, Krishna consciousness was presented in a different way. So there's different ways to present Krishna consciousness. We see that in the scriptures. So my spiritual master said, he said, so there are different ways that his disciples are trying to please him, Srila Prabhupada. He says some are innovative and creative, and some are just quite, somehow that word is slipping me, but they're basically, Krishna, not thinking of the word right now. But anyway, they're traditional. They're traditional. There's some that are traditional and some that are innovative, some are creative. This particular person, who's also a spiritual master, is conservative. Thank you, Lila. Conservative, very traditional conservative. So this particular spiritual master is very traditional. And he thought my spiritual master was too way out in a way that he presented Krishna consciousness, didn't appreciate him at all. And so I asked him, I said, so he told me, he said, so you need to be aware of this. In our community, in our institution, there are like different camps, if you will, of people of how they present Krishna consciousness. And he said, he's doing the best that he can to please Srila Prabhupada in the way that he knows how. He's conservative, he's traditional, that's his way. And I want you, when you travel, because he had asked me and my husband to travel, me and Ekavir Prabhu, to travel after he left to different places. When you travel, you're going to meet some of his disciples. I want you to be kind and loving. And if you get to ever meet him or talk to him, I want you to do the same. I want you to be kind. I want you to be loving. I want you to be an example of giving love, because that was the mood of my spiritual master. Come to pass, I did go to a country where I did meet some of his disciples. And it was quite interesting because some of his disciples had his mood, their guru's mood. And I was like, okay, Krishna, this is the test, how do I serve? How do we serve these devotees? And I remember that so clearly, that we had an opportunity where, at that time, my body was more flexible, so I could just serve people prasadam. And I remember just getting down on my knees and serving those devotees prasadam, and just being kind. And I tell you, from my experience of being around some of those disciples, their attitude and mood just changed. It just changed. And even when I got a chance to speak to the spiritual master, I didn't have that resentment and anger in my heart, because I had gotten instruction from my spiritual master. And I prayed to him. I would always pray to him, please let me be this example, please. And so when I spoke to that guru and I asked him, what is it? Why would you do that? Why did you do that? And he told me, I don't like charismatic people. I was like, ooh, okay. Hare Krishna, what can you do about that? He was very honest. So that story is, it's a story that helps me always, it always helps me. Even when I do sometimes feel some resentment in my heart or some disturbance in my heart, I always try to pray to my spiritual master, pray to Srila Prabhupada to help me to remove it, because it's not nice. It's not nice. It doesn't feel good. And so if I've committed any offenses to anyone that's on this call or anyone, please forgive me. Definitely do not like to harbor envy or jealousy or anger, resentments. No, unless we can use it for Krishna, unless we can use it in Krishna's service. I hope that's helpful, my dear friends. Okay, so if there's no other comments, then I will take leave. And I want to thank you, Tarka Prabhu, for being here, Priya Manjari, Leela Kisheri, Jamil Prabhu, Yashadev Prabhu, Madhupan Leela, Devi Dasi, and Jagannath Pandit. Thank you very, very much. Have a wonderful Tuesday.
Jai Hare Krishna. Thank you for the wonderful class, Mother.
Gurudev's mercy. I know nothing. I know nothing. Actually, I was looking at Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of my personalities that I go to also, and he was speaking. I was seeing how he was speaking about the wicked mind, and he was talking about. I was just trying to find that. He was talking about himself, and it just, when you read it, it's just like, oh my God. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is amazing, great personality that changed so many hearts, changed so many lives. And reading that, it's just like, whoa, Krishna, please help me one day, please. And then last thing that I did want to share, which I hadn't gotten a chance to share, was Giraj Maharaj. Thank you, Yashadev Prabhu. I'll read this really quickly. Giraj Swami, one day in Surat, when Srila Prabhupada was taking his massage, I asked him, how can we deal with envy? Okay, so there are great devotees that asked that question that you asked, Leela Kisheri. I know that I was envious. I knew that I was envious. This is Giraj Maharaj sharing this. And I knew that envy was bad. But I asked the question. I had been considering the subject, and I had come to the conclusion that there was no use in being envious because Krishna is unlimited, and Krishna's service is unlimited, and Krishna's mercy is unlimited. If someone has some special service to Krishna or is getting some special mercy from Krishna, it doesn't really prejudice any changes because there's unlimited service. It doesn't really prejudice my chances. This is Giraj Maharaj, because there's unlimited service and unlimited mercy. But at the same time, being envious was hurting my Krishna consciousness. So I asked Srila Prabhupada what to do with envy. Srila Prabhupada replied by asking me, can you think of any reasons why you shouldn't be envious? I had already thought of so many reasons. So I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. Then Prabhupada said, to be envious of someone means that you don't like that person. That not liking should be directed towards the demons that are causing so much trouble to the devotees and so much havoc in the world. That not liking should not be directed towards the devotees. So in our community, if there's anybody that we think we don't like, let's transform that. And maybe if we have to not like somebody, then don't like the materialists. If we just have to not like somebody, but let's not do it in our devotee communities. And I'm saying that about myself. I printed that story because I wanted to keep it for me to remind myself. Okay, my dear devotees, thank you very much. Have a beautiful Tuesday. Haribol.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Okay. Tarka Prabhu, you have something? Chat? Okay, in the chat, let's see. Jagannath Pandit, thank you, Mother. Leela Kishore, thank you, Mataji. So rather than seeking to get, thank you, Mataji. Okay. I'm looking for Tarka Prabhu. Okay, Tarka posted the verse. All right. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very, very much, devotees, again. And go to my 8:30 class today. I'm better, so I can start functioning. Haribol. Do I just get off yesterday, Prabhu?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.